Hey, it's me, your local Wintertide brand salesman, back at it again with another endgame setup, which shaped out, as usual, to be a pretty solid all-rounder. If you're unfamiliar with the skill, Wintertide brand is a cooldown brand skill that doesn't really play like other cooldown skills, because if you play Wintertide brand, you go all in, and you don't use any other cooldown skills for damage. So, Wintertide brand is your clear skill, it's your single target, and you can take this build really far if you build it correctly. So, how do we do damage this league? First, we have to address the changes to support gems. You know, before this league came out, everybody was talking after patch notes about the Elementalist nerfs, Golem nerfs, but honestly, the real nerf was the changes to Awaken gems. These were replaced with exceptional gems, but there is not a single exceptional gem in the game right now that I can link to my Wintertide brand. So honestly, this stealth nerf is the real nerf to our build. I understand in nature that the exceptional gems are meant to be more transformative rather than just being, like a 10-15% stronger, but we still lost about 10-15% damage from this change. As a result of this change, I am adjusting some of the fundamental scaling inputs of the build. The first solution to scaling damage, given the lack of some gem support options, is to actually not use gem links at all. We slot Wintertide brand into an Archdemon Crown, which is linked to 2 Essence more multiplier modifiers, as well as also giving +5 gem levels to Wintertide brand. We probably wouldn't ever use exceptional gems in an Archdemon Crown because those gems are disproportionately affected by the -2 level to support gems. Another upside here is that although this is effectively like a 6 or 7 link, we only pay the mana cost of a 4 link Wintertide brand, so our mana liabilities are much lower. The second build defining source of damage, as per the video title, is Righteous Fire. Now we won't be using Righteous Fire to do any damage itself, but instead for the global more spell damage buff that it provides while active. Now the main challenge to overcome is how to reasonably keep Righteous Fire active as a low life energy shield character without dying. Obviously, if there was never any downside to running Righteous Fire, every build that does spell damage would just run Righteous Fire. The first hurdle to overcome is how to keep Righteous Fire on while being a low life build, namely while also using a core scaling elixir setup. As we know, Righteous Fire will automatically turn off if your life is equal to 1, and core scaling elixir sets your life to 1 when you use the flask. There's a few potential ways to get around this. The first is to just have health regen, because the rule around this is that RF will stay on as long as life gain from regeneration exceeds life loss per tick. Unfortunately, we have to run Zealot's Oath. It's really non-negotiable in our setup in order to counter the degen, so that's ruled out. Another solution is to run Eternal Youth, which applies ES recharge to life instead of energy shield. Since we are basically never taking life damage, the recharge for life will never stop. However, this keystone is a little bit far away from where we start on the tree, and I do like to run Vault Discipline for emergency ES recharge. The solution that we go for is the Recover Life on Flask Use Mastery, which basically means that whenever you use the core scaling elixir, 4% of life is gained back right after you are set to 1 HP, so RF stays on. Fun fact, if you ever get tagged by like a Maven Beam that prevents all recovery, you can actually just hit your core scaling elixir to instantly turn off your Righteous Fire, since the life recovery is negated and your life is set to 1. So that's how we keep Righteous Fire on, but how do we not die from Righteous Fire as an energy shield build? Unlike life-based builds where you can just simply drink from a life flask if you happen to need some instant recovery, energy shield builds rely on energy shield recharge, which happens after 2 seconds normally if you have not taken any damage. Turns out, with Righteous Fire on, you are always taking damage, so recharge will never happen. The first step is to obviously hit 90% max fire resistance, which is fairly easy to do with some jewels and breach rings, and don't forget that core scaling elixir is also a ruby flask. We then use Zealot's Oath to out-regenerate the Righteous Fire degen. This alone is not good enough, however, because if we do get sent to low ES, we can't just wait around for our entire ES bar to slowly regenerate. Enter Bound by Destiny, for which the 2 Hunter and 4 Shaper item modifiers are active for us. The 2 Hunter mod provides burst regeneration of 35% total energy shield over 1 second every 4 seconds. If you were to divide this on a per second basis, it would equate to about 9% per second, but the fact that it happens over 1 second every 4 seconds makes it more likely that it gets you out of a pinch. This build also has 2 panic buttons for on-demand recovery. We are using the Betrayal modifier that recovers around a third of your ES instantly when you focus, which we can use around every 12 seconds. You can also press Vault Discipline, which forces energy shield recharge, but of course this requires souls. These sources of recovery are layered between 75% attack block and 81% spell block, with energy shield on block from a shield. Endurance charges are generated every second if we've been hit recently, which is almost always. Cast when damage taken burns endurance charges to extend the damage reduction duration to buy time for our sources of recovery to kick in. And when you combine all of this, we have a setup that is pretty tanky in practice, and you really get out of a lot of sticky situations that you honestly have no business surviving. I want to quickly go over the path of building because this build has some very key breakpoints that need to be hit. Most importantly is flask uptime. So our flask charges are generated from a Tides of Time as well as an elevated chest implicit. And then, so in your PoB, when you hover over your flasks, they should all read 100% flask uptime. For the tree, we should start with Supreme Ostentation. What pushed the decision to ignore our attributes over the line was the nerf to how much energy shield that you get from intelligence. Since attributes no longer provide bonuses, the entire tree is tattooed, and we also use the rune graph of the fortress, providing 40% energy shield for 1 skill point with effectively no downside. The Elegant Hubris jewel is also being used in conjunction with an impossible escape to fix our attack block and generate endurance charges. A lot of what I've done in the past is like an impossible escape to blood magic to grab these block nodes. And then you have to run like an enduring composure for endurance charge generation, which is fine, but then it also consumes like a jewel socket. This setup kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone, so it frees up jewel sockets to do other things. Speaking of which, there is a massive thread of hope, which picks up 4 critical nodes. Ash, Storm, and Frost is probably the best known for Wintertide brand if you cannot allocate it. You also pick up a lot of ES, some cast speed, and increased damage taken. And if you're not level 100, you can just run like a rare jewel in this socket and then allocate the points later. So Rune Graph of Gemcraft is combined with a level 21 Arrogance, which allows you to reserve a 50% aura and still have life left over. It also recovers some levels for your Wintertide support skills and your Archdemon Crown because they're non-exceptional. As mentioned before, the 2 Hunter and 4 Shaper Bound by Destiny mods are active. Your shield and belt should always be Shaper influenced, and then you need to Awaken or 2 max fire resistance rings so that they both have Shaper and Hunter influence. The best imbuement for Wintertide is Hypothermia, and we are also using a Righteous Fire gem that is imbued with a level 1 Arcane Surge so that using Cold Snap or Brand Recall will also get you the Arcane Surge buff. This is very important because Wintertide brand is linked to a level 20 Arcane Surge, but it's very hard to activate via Wintertide brand itself. Everything else should be kind of straightforward, but I just really want to cover these specific breakpoints in the build. I'm going to say that hitting dot cap on Wintertide brand is actually pretty easy, but I do not think it's worth giving up defensive layers to do so. I think the final version that I ended up with is a good middle ground of offense and defense, and honestly the Cold Dog archetype definitely leans towards more of a balanced all-rounder approach. But let me show you anyways. So in Path of Building, your true total DPS is estimated to be this number under average stages multiplied by 4. Since dot cap is around 36 million, you hit dot cap when this number here is around 9 million. If you really wanted to hit dot cap, all you really have to do is just dual wield scepters or wands. You can see here that if I just put on an identical wand, I'm basically almost there. And then obviously the shield nodes on your passive skill tree are not doing anything because you don't have a shield equipped. So if you just allocate it to just anything else, basically you are going to hit 9 million just very easily. I guess if you're farming content like, I don't know, Sanctum, or if you're just doing pure bossing, you could do something like this. But in my opinion, I prefer to have like a balance of defenses. So I think it's really excessive. And there you have it. Another Wintertide brand setup with potential for dot cap if you really want it. This time without golem stacking. Just some, clever use of game mechanics, as we say. So if I see another Reddit post saying that Wintertide brand does no damage in the endgame, I just might crash out. But jokes aside, it's been pretty solidly. Ground loot is definitely back, but that also means that, inflation is back, so everything is more expensive. But that worked out for me because I craft all my Wintertide brand gear myself because I have to. And using divines to metacraft becomes relatively less punishing compared to previous leagues. And honestly, this build is really not that expensive because it caps out without expensive chase items like, like Mage Blood. And I probably spent around 100, 200 divines on this character. It's a little bit hard to estimate because, like, week one, like the first weekend prices are a little bit weird. But being off meta means that some of your gear really isn't that contested and is pretty easy to get. But yeah, that's about it for me this league. We'll be back next league with more Wintertide brands, so see you then. So I want to quickly go over the helmet crafting because it's probably the most important part of the build. And at the same time, you're probably not going to be able to find anything like this on the market because I don't know why anybody would bother crafting something like this. So anyways, first you have to find an Archdemon crown. The eye level doesn't really matter because all the modifiers are not actually the base item. They're from either essence or veiled modifiers. So first thing you do, you have to fracture a hysteria modifier. You have to fracture this mod and not the other mod because the other mod has a gem tag, which is going to be important later. So we just fracture it however many times it takes. Dear Lord. Okay, so we hit it. Okay, so after you have the fractured base, what you're going to do is you're going to go to faceted and glyphic, and then you're basically going to look for, we're looking for socketed gems deal 30% more elemental damage and +1 intelligence gems. So it's about like a 1 in 16, I think, this league. It used to be like a 1 in 12 last league, but then they added like a new new essence modifier that is also glyphic, but it also has like a gem tag, so it kind of bricks our fossil crafting. But it is what it is. I think on average it does take about 16 attempts, so but yeah, I mean, it could get pretty expensive depending on how unlucky you are. Yeah, so in this case, we hit the +1 gems, but it was a strength gem, so unlucky. But yeah, okay, there you go. So once you hit the softed gems, deal 30% more elemental damage, as well as the +1 to intelligence gems. What you can do, you go to Wild Bristle Matron, and then you lock your suffixes. Suffix just cannot be changed, and then you are going to do a Veiled Chaos Orb. Okay, so for the Veiled Chaos Orb, I believe the correct block is, I think it's physical damage while focused. I know on Craft of Exile, I think it's like zombies has a higher weight, but everyone's telling me that this is the correct block. And in any case, it doesn't make that much of a difference. You're looking for +2 AoE gems, so in this case, we missed. And at which point you have to Wild Bristle Matron again, and then just go again. But, pretend we didn't miss. You would go for, here it is. So you would go for increased area effect +2 to socket the AoE gems. And then after that, depending on where your prefixes are, it doesn't really matter because, I mean, you're just looking for the damage mods itself. You can probably craft, like, I don't know, armor and energy shield, slam, whatever, call it a day. And that's how you craft it.